Sintia. How are you? It's been a year and a half already. A lot has happened since you were last on.
Like last summer?
No, I think it was the summer before. Yeah. In fact, I'm basically sure of it. Yeah. I moved. The original fireside, the original home of the podcast is no more. So, well, the people who bought my house are very nice. They'd probably let us do a guest episode there for some time. So, so senior year, and you just completed your oration 2 weeks ago.
Something like that, yeah.
Hmm. How are you feeling about the off ramp from college? Do you feel as if you're sort of feel as if this pace of things here at school is actually slowing down since you're done the thesis, done the oration?
In a sense, I guess. Yeah, the classes aren't. We're still doing, in terms of the workload, it's still about the same, but
Okay.
like I have, it feels like I have more time in between classes, but I'm also having to, this is a very recent development. I'm now having to do twice the work study hours that I'm
Oh.
already doing, and I was already going over the limit. So yeah, I don't
Wow.
have much time to do
Uh-oh.
that.
That sounds like an email you weren't happy to receive.
It was in person, yes.
Dear Miss Albeno, it has come to our attention that in order to receive your diploma, we will be needing you to complete an extra 57 hours. Man, I was spoiled in college. I mean, I was a prefect. I mean, there was no time cards, no expectations of having to complete a certain number of hours. You had certain events that were mandatory, of course. I was sitting in my room one time and a student walks in. He said, Jonathan, I have a question. You're a prefect, right? I said, yes, I am. I mean, I was his prefect. Like he was in my dorm. He was a little bit of a spacey kid. He said, you're a prefect, right? Yes, I'm your prefect. In point of fact, he said, okay, yeah. He said, so you guys, so how do you guys get paid? I said, well, we have this structure. He said, oh, because I just thought you guys got paid like per bust. He said, I thought you had to get people in trouble in order to get paid for your work as a prefect. You had to like hand in proof of having dress coded people in order to get your discount off tuition.
I think that's still people's impression.
That is still,
So
oh, really?
yeah,
Wow. Maybe there needs to be a speech. Maybe a certain alumni needs to return and dispel certain rumors. I think this is less true now. When I first got back to Lander, many students would ask me if things were very different than when I was a student in the first class. Many people would ask if things were better when I was a student in the first class. And I was adamant that no, they were not better. I would always say to them, things are far better now. Yeah, yeah, your outdoor trips are not car camping during a spring snowstorm down in a ravine somewhere with a bunch of food bought from Mr. D's using vouchers that barely worked. And the class schedule actually respects the number of credit hours that are actually on your transcript, as opposed to apparently, oh golly, I don't know if I should be telling these stories. But when Dr. Holmes first became dean, apparently he sat down with the curriculum and went through everything that was planned. And he came back to the academic committee and he said, well, the students are going to graduate with about 125 credit hours, but we've planned about 155 for their total career as students over the 4 years. So he said, so if they're complaining about being overworked, it's probably not entirely hyperbole.
probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of work, you've done some really impressive thinking about the subject of the city, and especially as we wrestle with its development in civilization um, post the beginning of, I guess I'll say, history, in the sense of the beginning of man's struggle upon the earth, rather than the Edenic and, in some sense, perfect world we had before the fall in a Christian understanding of the world. So I was wondering if for people who have not read your thesis, you could just give us the 5-minute version of how you use that term dialectic, and then dive into some of the questions that you get to, especially regarding Genesis.
See, you would think after having written the thesis and given the oration, I would be better at summarizing what it was about. I think what I settled on was I starting with the question of why, what does it mean that the founder of the first city was a fratricide?
Mm-hmm.
And initially, like at the start of the process, like I think the question that I was wanting to answer was whether, like, in what sense we could say that man is a political animal by nature, given that in the Genesis account it's explicitly like post-lapsarian thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, like, what sort of implications does that have for like our understanding of um, the city and man's relationship to it? Yeah.
Are you thinking that you had this instinct that man's building of cities, reliance on cities, was in some way a like a trauma response to the strife between human beings?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and I just, with all the other accounts that we encounter in the the curriculum here, just didn't like the vision of the city as described in Aristotle and even like Aquinas. It just something seemed like incomplete to me.
Okay. Are you thinking of what Plato writes about
Yeah,
the in the Republic? Are you thinking also of works like More's Utopia?
less so the more recent political philosophers, but yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Also, yeah, I remember being, when we were reading, was it Hobbes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Leviathan, being struck by, and I didn't know I still don't know how to what to do with that, but it seemed like the way Hobbes describes the city seemed to be a lot more to have a lot more in common with the biblical view
Mm-hmm.
of the city. I was just like, I wasn't sure how to reconcile that with the like Aristotelian Thomistic account, which seemed
Or even just the cultural facts that in Greek society, to just use an early example, the city was your insurance, it was your retirement, it was your income, it was your family network. Like, exile was tantamount to death, and not a very pleasant death, right? I mean, it was one thing to be hung or beheaded. It was another thing to be just sent out to starve, freeze, or be exploited by robbers. right? And so exile, in a way, was worse than death because it had this extra layer of indignity, ignominy. Yeah, yeah. And so we find these cultures that have noble philosophers who clearly speak about the city as being something that is the basis of how mankind can be, in a way, brought to live a good life, right? Um, Whereas Genesis seems to, it seems to me that you find a suspicion about the city project inherent in Genesis. Is that true to say?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. What for those, again, for those of you, for those of us who haven't read through your whole work, can you just give us a summary of what you see going on with the story of Cain and how Cain's division from communication with God and his fratricide is sort of the premise from which he has to go and build the first city?
I'm sorry, I think I missed the question.
Oh, no problem at all. Can you just give us a summary of Cain's story, like where?
How it leads to him building.
Yeah, exactly. We all know Cain kills Abel, but maybe some of us are less familiar with what happens after that.
Yeah, well, that's the the funny thing about that text is that the actual part pertaining to the city is just like one or two verses,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not mistaken, and the majority of the narrative is spent on like Cain's like inner struggle with, well, like I think I started with his sacrifice being rejected,
Mm.
and just how that the narrative slowly discloses like his his response to that.
Right.
There's like already progressive moving away from God,
Mm-hmm.
starting starting even then, like way before
Mm-hmm.
he decides to kill his brother, and way before he founds the city, and then like the actual act of founding a city is just like, yeah, he had a son and like named like built a city and named it after his son, and that's it. Like there's no explanation of like, presumably there were more people in the city, but it's just like
I'm a city of what?
all of
Right.
a sudden, yeah,
Planning council.
Yeah.
yeah,
He was
how
the mayor, the planning council, the founder. Yeah, public works, sanitation, all of it all together. Well, I mean, honestly, I mean, a city of one is not all that different in size from some of the townships we find here in Wyoming, right? I mean, at least on an order of magnitude, there are cities out here in the desert with like 9 people. So,
yeah. So that's why I was trying to stick as close as I could to just do a close reading, yeah, just on the text itself.
hmm.
Um,
Have you and I ever talked about, I'm trying to think of our conversations over the years. Have you and I ever talked about Daniel Quinn and what he writes about some of the story of Cain and Abel in his book Ishmael? I don't know that I would place the book up there the with the founding works of philosophy, but nonetheless, I think it has some ideas that are definitely worth pondering. Um, One conclusion that one of his characters at least draws in the book is that the story of Cain and Abel is the Hebrew attempt to deal with the separation of people who lived nomadically versus people who went through the agricultural revolution and therefore became less nomadic, more stationary, more likely to build cities, right? Because you needed a central place from which to go and take care of crops, and into which you could gather the crops for distribution, sale, or grinding into flour and what have you. And so, as I was reading your passages, I was really bearing in mind that idea that, well, perhaps the story of Cain and Abel is an attempt to deal with why did certain branches of humanity decide to basically accept the double-edged sword of the agricultural revolution rather than rather than stay in the lifestyle of nomadic herders / hunter-gatherers.
This would have been very handy to have while I was
Oh
writing,
no! Don't
mentioned
worry. When you do your master's,
do a part 2.
yeah, when you do your master's work here in a couple of years, I'll send you over a copy of it. So I personally think that the author of that book is trying to get away from some of the questions about, okay, what does Genesis say about the relation between man and God? I think so. I'm not blaming him for that, but I think he's trying to deal with it. He's trying to deal with what man's natural history may have been, rather than perhaps the theological implications of what is going on in the story of Cain and Abel, and how does sin expand geometrically, right? Sin makes things worse. The disobedience of Adam and Eve leads to the murder a generation later, because sin has a way of expanding if left unchecked. So I guess what I've been thinking about reading this is, do you see the city as a symbol of self-sufficiency for humankind, and therefore the city's a symbol of lack of trust in providence?
Well, that's certainly how it begins.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I framed it in the using the dialectic, because I was very confused. I think I was working on the first draft of the thesis, because I think I was really trying to have this very clear-cut definition or answer to, is the city a good or a bad thing in the biblical view,
In the biblical scheme
and
of
it
the
seemed
world.
to be going back and forth pretty much with each new narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, okay, it's not as simple as just it is, even though it starts as pretty condemning of the city, it doesn't stay there. It's there's a development in the, and I obviously, because of the length of the thesis, that was one of the hardest parts of writing the thesis. I had narrowing the scope enough that I had to pick which figures to look at in the process of that development, because I couldn't just look at the whole of the Old Testament.
Sure.
Even though all of it is relevant to the development of the city.
Uh-huh.
So I just had to cut so many parts out.
Right.
But yeah,
Can we actually do a little sidebar on that?
Yes.
You know the expression "kill your babies" when it comes to writing?
No.
Oh, really? Oh, it's the best. It's the idea that when you write something, typically you have an argument and you have a development of that argument. Usually you will find in your editing and revision process parts that you thought was a really good point, or you really enjoyed writing, or you think sums up some thought you have super well. But typically the mature writer will have to kill his babies, in that he will just have to find parts of his work that just need to go. They just don't fundamentally assist his central argument, even if they may be good pieces of prose. Uh, so,
I've heard that
oh,
extensively.
really? Oh, Sasanka's very fond of it. I think Schubert has been on here, and I think we've talked about it with her as well, right? So, yeah. But anyway, it's the sort of tragic loss that comes about in the editing process. So, and I know that I mentioned it to you earlier, especially your passage about Nimrod, which I do want to get to. Um, so I was just curious, if there were parts that you did write about, that you did think about, that you were hoping to keep in here, but had to let go.
Trying to remember. Uh, I don't think there were parts that I like actually wrote that then I had to cut out.
Hmm.
There were more that it was more so in the process of reading and doing the research like over the summer
Yep.
that I had so many more parts that I wanted to include. And it was originally, I wasn't planning on just focusing on scripture. I actually had like
Oh yeah, I remember
like
in
10 other books. Yeah,
Yeah,
that I
in
wanted.
July we were talking about Augustine, City of
Yeah.
God, right? What I think, yeah, we probably talked about Utopia as well. Is this something that we can include? Does the Republic have things to offer in a helpful way? There were other
Yeah,
there were
for
other works.
the actual writing, thankfully my advisor was like um, told me that I probably needed to just focus on. I think it was a mutual agreement that it would probably be best if I just focus on scripture, because that in itself was just like there was just a lot there already,
Mm-hmm.
rather than trying to bring in all these other texts.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it was more in writing the first draft. There were like the part on Nimrod. It wasn't. I don't think it was in my initial draft. Mm. But my advisor told me to add it
Mm-hmm.
because it was to help with. I forget exactly which parts came before and after, but it was specifically to transition. Oh, it was from the transition from the flood narrative
Right.
to the Tower of Babel, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, but I wasn't originally planning on writing about it.
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed like, yeah, I think my advisor told me like, oh, like you seem to just like skip over this, and I think it would actually be helpful to have like a small
Have some
segment.
treatment of it.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I want to get to that part for sure. I think there's so much worth talking about in the story of Cain that I don't want to give it the short shrift. What what can you say about the comparison you make between the clothes that Adam and Eve sew for themselves once their eyes are opened and the walls of the city that were typical of cities of that era?
Well, that's the funny thing about that is that there's a mention of Adam and Eve making garments for themselves. They're like fig leaves, I believe. But then God gives them different garments. They're like garments of skin, and this is um, a theme that I touched on more explicitly in my oration.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I wasn't able to find the which church father uh, talked about this. I believe it was. I want to say it was Ephraim the Syrian,
Mm-hmm.
but he made an explicit connection between the garments of skin and the city walls.
Mm.
And the idea is basically that the garments are and this is pretty much like unanimous in a lot of the early patristic writings, that they were represent sort of the mortality that man put on as a kind. They speak of it as like a second nature after
Oh.
after the fall. and I think it's Gregory of Nyssa, I want to say. He speaks about it as like man's existence was no longer life in the sense that he had in Eden. It was more like a life in death, he calls it. And
A life in death.
yeah, and
Prelapsarian existence was, as in before the fall, he was living life in death.
no. Post.
Oh,
That's
okay,
what
okay.
life and death.
Eat the apple.
That's what the garments
Ah,
are a symbol of, because they're made of
leaves,
animal
which,
skins.
oh.
The garments that God puts on them. Yeah,
Mhm.
I still don't know what to make of that. The first sort of covering that they make for themselves is seen as like inadequate. Like their response to like having eaten of the fruit, the tree, it's like to cover themselves, but then God gives them a different covering
Right.
just before they're
Expelled.
Yeah.
All right, so my first blush reaction is you can go to a fig tree or a fig bush and you can pluck leaves and sew garments for yourselves without killing it. If you're going to have garments made of animal skins, the animal's got to die.
Yep.
I think
God who put them.
right. I think my science professors would kill me for implying that Adam and Eve did not, were complete vegetarians, or there was there was no animal death before the fall. But with that aside, I wonder if there's there's a moral lesson of some kind in that. Yeah, the fall will bring about the death of the innocent, right? In order to give you basic protection, now that we're expelling you from the garden, animals are gonna have to die because of you.
Yeah, I think that's one reading. I think gosh, now I'm trying to sort out all the different. I had like a full like two-sided page of just quotes of like different fathers, what they had to say about how they interpreted the garments of skin.
Really?
And yeah, I think the common thread in most of them was that you could think of the garments as it's so complicated to even talk about this because it's related to the idea of technology as well, and that's like a whole separate. I had to like try really hard in the thesis like not to go off on that tangent. Really hard having to
hold yourself back.
Like
yeah,
talking about the city as like it's very related to the idea of technology and how it's treated in scripture as well. But it's the garments are one, they're external to the body. It's something that's put on them, and you could think of it as it's a layer of death to protect them from death, and that sort of represents for the church fathers man's existence from that point on in the world. It's going to have to be it's a reliance on sort of rephrase your initial question?
Absolutely. No, that's fine. In your in your written work, you draw this direct link between the walls of the city and the garments worn by Adam and Eve as they are expelled from the garden. I was curious why that was a comparison to be made. Specifically,
Oh, yeah.
what does, I guess you could just say protection, but is there something that the garments provide that the city walls are also attempting to provide? Again, maybe you could say protection from the elements, protection from attackers, protection from outsiders.
Yeah, yeah, I think.
Or is it a cover? Is it, again, or protection? Yes, that's in there, but is it also a blocking out, right? That we don't want to be seen somehow.
Yeah.
And if you'll give me a little bit of rope here, Adam and Eve make their own garments to cover their nakedness, right? Their eyes were opened. So they saw each other's nakedness. God gives them garments made of animal skins. Maybe you can say, well, that's more for protection, but it's certainly still covering something. Now, these cities, by necessity, in this time period, need to have walls. But what do people say about modern cities? People in modern cities are constantly saying, well, one of the things that I find draining when I first arrive is the lack of eye contact. No one will look at you. A man could die on the subway and no one even sees it. It's right there in front of them, but they don't see it, right? People live in the same building and pass each other for years without ever learning their name. People talk about the city bestowing this lack of sight, which seems to still be with us. So if we rewind to the ancient city, are those walls an attempt to hide something?
Yeah, that's part of the comparison. Yeah, no, I wish I had the list of quotes that I used for my oration, because basically the way to think of the city is like the communal expression of the garments. So the garment,
the thing we make
the
for
garments
ourselves.
Are to Adam and Eve what the city walls are to mankind.
Okay.
And
could we also say that because the city is something we make for ourselves, they also bear comparison to the garments of fig leaves?
Yeah, well, that's. I'm not sure what to make of that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
The garments that they put on versus the garments that were given to them.
Right.
And then the city is. Yeah, there's something strange going on with the mark of Cain.
Mm-hmm.
That is, it's given, it's put on Cain. And I don't remember if I said this in my thesis, but
Mm-hmm.
the mark is also has this weird duality about it's put on Cain as protection,
Right.
but it also, as a result, will greatly exacerbate just violence. Like he will be avenged sevenfold. And so, yeah, I think there's something similar going on with the city. Like you brought up the idea of you could think of walls as like containing something or like defining a space, but also, and obviously that's simultaneous with that. There's a hiding and a blocking and excluding something in that same act.
Mm-hmm.
That just goes for anything else. Like if you like trying to define something necessarily means you're going to exclude other things from that definition. And so yeah, it's very much I think that's also why it's the thesis title is quoting a line that from Cain. This is after his curse, I believe. It's like, from thy face I shall be hidden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know that carries a lot of like moral implications, but
Sure.
it's more so the idea that what is initially to use the phrase you used earlier, like a trauma response
Mm-hmm.
from man, like, after being exiled and sort of separated from the presence of God. I think it's hard to speak of the city as sort of trying to ignore that aspect of
the way in which it acts
its
as a veil.
as like man distancing himself from God.
Uh-huh.
Because there's just like such an explicit connection being made, and that's why because the way I chose to treat the subject was through the biblical lens. Like that's why I found it hard. But I could. This isn't to say that you could look at the city in other ways, like apart, like ignoring that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And you could also think of the garments apart from that. But yeah, given that I was mainly looking at scripture and then for my oration at like early church fathers, yeah, it seemed like an obvious connection. Yeah, it's hard because I think I only mentioned it in like the introduction of the thesis.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't have the space to talk about it as much. And then the oration is only like 30 minutes as well. So
right.
I wish I could just have written a separate thesis on the symbol of the garments of skin.
I don't think your writing career is over by any means. Yeah. Okay. So Cain receives this mark, which both identifies him as the killer, right? So he can, in a certain way, never get away from it. Anyone who sees him knows that he's a fratricide. While simultaneously it is supposed to be a sort of gift from God in that it also is a warning to people.
Yeah,
not to touch him.
It's really hard talking about the mark because I think in sort of the popular imagination we have this. It's hard not to think of it as like a literal like mark on the forehead.
Yeah, we're thinking Harry Potter, lightning, right?
But like the Hebrew is like very like it's open to like a lot of um, different interpretations. Like it could literally mean like it was put on him, like on his skin, or it could. I think it could also be translated as like it was given to him, which seems like you could interpret that a lot of ways. Like it was that like, and so I think one of the interpretations that I considered when, especially when writing that part, was that if the mark was the city, like the city itself is the mark of Cain. And
Oh, I like that.
I had like no source to back that up, but it seems like a very
But it's a fun idea. Let's run with it. Is the city. That would. I want to be. Who am I kidding? I never want to be careful. Let's try to be careful. That would sort of rhyme with those ideas from Daniel Quinn, right? That humanity is going in these two separate directions, right? And one branch of them are settling down, developing agriculture, therefore developing more permanent settlements, i.e. cities. It seems that, yes, the other branches of humanity, the other tribes, would very quickly know those people, right? Yeah, those are the city dwellers, and they are other from us in some really important sense, right? They're attached to this one spot where they're growing their crops and living near or inside walls, right? And so they would have a certain mark to them. They'd be city slickers.
So was this, what was his name, Daniel?
Daniel Quinn.
Was he saying that which of the two derived from Cain? I'm a little confused.
So his interpretation is that the agricultural revolution is bound up in the image of Cain, right? He makes his offering like the fruit of the field, right? Whereas basically nomadic people are represented by Abel, who's making an offering of the lamb, right? Yeah. And so his reading is that Genesis, this part of Genesis, is the, again, Hebrew attempt to give the next generation an understanding of why the people who live outside the trust in the Lord that's implied by a hunting, gathering, and nomadic lifestyle, where you basically just are constantly migrating and relying upon the fortunes of weather and topography to provide you with food. And sometimes that goes very well, and sometimes that goes not so well. But there's this trust in the Lord that's implied in the, again, nomadic lifestyle.
Yeah, I guess I'm
herders,
maybe we don't have to
gatherers.
like, dig into this as much, but I'm not sure I'm seeing if there's a necessary connection to be made between like. It sounds like he's making like shepherding is specifically a nomadic thing versus like the agricultural side, because I could see both of those. Well, I guess. Okay, I could see how. Yeah, agriculture. I guess you would need to be settled, at least for parts of that process. But
Right.
it I guess, yeah, I'm not saying you could probably do the same with uh, something like the herding of animals. Like you could, I don't know, have like your little
Right. If you're, yeah.
not stray far from that. It's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Right. You can just turn your cows out into the pasture and then round them up, and right. Modern day ranchers don't need to move around all year
Right.
long. I think that's true. Um, I don't think that would have been particularly true of even someone living like Abraham did, um, or what the Jew, what the Jews leaving Egypt would have done. They probably would have left with their sheep and their cattle, right? But they would have just driven them ahead of themselves without. I don't think the animals did not necessarily create a need to settle down, whereas raising crops inherently created a need to stay put. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Although, yes, I mean, if you're, there should probably a distinction be made between a true hunter gatherer versus nomadic herdsman. I'm sure there's a bit of a fuzzy line
Yeah.
there. I'm sure, but but you could probably say a true hunter gatherer. Maybe they have dogs, right? Some sort of domestic canine, but they're basically following herds of, in North America, buffalo, but in other parts of the world, other migratory herbivores, right? And you're gathering what you can in terms of plants, but you're essentially following larger mammals around to live off of them. Yeah. Versus, yeah, you're driving your own herds of sheep or cows or other animals. Again, I'm sure it's a bit of a fuzzy line, but uh, I guess there's a distinction to be made between those two ways of life. Yeah.
Oh, the mark of Cain. How did we? I'm trying to
Yeah.
try to
How did we get onto the mark of Cain? Well, you were just I remember seeing some undoubtedly Christian produced probably early 90s movie that was, one of these attempts to make a movie about the stories of scripture. I think they were fairly well-meaning, but usually suffered from pretty low production values and so forth. But anyway, yes, I remember distinctly as a kid seeing the mark of Cain, and again, I mean, it's,
666.
it wasn't that, it wasn't that dramatic. Uh, it, that would have been something. It's some scar across his forehead.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big ugly birthmark. So
Yeah. It's where that image came from, but that's kind of like
well,
all we can think about when. Yeah. But I don't know. I'm at least. I think it's possible to think of other interpretations that I'm equally as confused about. I'm not sure. Yeah.
right.
What the difference is, or the implications of it not being like a literal mark on his forehead.
Right. And I guess to be the devil's advocate, someone could say to you, Sintia, does the text itself specifically support the understanding of the mark of Cain being the city, right? Or is that essentially an interpretation? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's it's a fair question. Like I said, I couldn't find um, any sources to back that up, but it just seemed like a pretty interesting connection, at least to make, given the ambiguity of the Hebrew.
Mm. Do you think there's anything we should draw from that? Cain names his city Enoch, and he has named his son Enoch. I mean, is there something to be read into that?
Yeah,
His city is as important to him as his own offspring somehow, or does it
think,
just mean he settled his family there?
yeah, I am trying to remember what I said in the thesis. There's a connection between. I think it's in the text. It's meant to remind us of Adam's act of naming the naming the animals,
Mm-hmm.
which is and just the action of naming more broadly in the scripture. It always carries like divine undertones, like it's something God does throughout scripture, changing the names,
Mm-hmm.
or giving names to people and to places, and so I think it's definitely more than some like like a sentimental. No, I'm gonna name my city after my child. Like there's something deeper being pointed at with that. That I mean, to put it um, very explicitly, it's related to um, the like the creative act of God. It's sort of Cain establishing himself as like his own kind of maker. Like he decides like it's like framing his own reality
Mm-hmm.
in his own terms. Yeah, I don't want to just be like reading
Uh-huh.
through the thesis, but yeah, I think that's roughly what I said.
Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah, as for I think there was some significance too in like the name itself. I can't remember what the Hebrew means, but there was also something weird going on with all the. I think it was the first genealogy that we get after, shortly after, um, yeah, the end of Genesis 4, because there's another Enoch that shows up.
Mm-hmm.
He's like doesn't die. He's like taken up or
Mm-hmm.
something, and he's like the first person. Yeah, I still don't know what to make of
Right.
that.
Of the
The
second
fact that there was
Enoch.
this, like, yeah,
Yeah.
Enoch that was sort of, yeah, the genealogies get a little confused, um, even when I was writing it. But I think he's came from the line of Cain.
Mm-hmm.
After like we get the descendants of Seth as well. But yeah, either way, it would be significant that there's like a second Enoch figure
Hmm.
like, shortly after.
Right.
Whether he came from the line of Cain or the line of Seth.
Hmm. Yeah. I don't know what to make of that either.
Yeah.
Okay. Where do we go from here? Talk to us about Nimrod.
The hunter gatherer.
A mighty hunter before the Lord, I think,
Yeah.
is the.
Yeah. What are you?
Why is he not a more prominent part of our own cultural consideration of Genesis, right? Any Christian school child could tell you a version of the Adam and Eve story, a version of the Moses story, a version of the Abraham story, right? They probably couldn't tell you a thing about Nimrod. They probably called someone in the schoolyard a Nimrod, perhaps. You think there's just not enough movement of the plot, so to speak, in
Yeah. I mean, I think.
for us, but it, I mean, you obviously found something worth commenting on, but again, most people frankly sort of brush over that
To
section
clarify,
of Genesis.
I think I only said it after my advisor explicitly told me to, like, oh,
Okay.
like, look at Nimrod. Like, I think this is important
Ah.
for the argument.
Mm-hmm.
I would, like, like most other people
You were ready
reading scripture,
yeah.
it just seemed like a
Wow.
strange, like
Poor Nimmy.
side
Yeah.
quest
Right.
thing.
You're ready to rush him aside.
Yeah. So I had it not been for my advisor telling me specifically to, like, spend some time looking at the few verses that we get about Nimrod, I don't think I would have seen anything in the narrative. I'm also trying to remember what I said about about him beyond that. Oh yeah, it was his connection with.
I remember you talking about how you say he's a mighty hunter before the Lord, but there was a sense in which I believe you phrase it as the hunting itself is a reliance on your technology of the bow. It perhaps represents a reliance on your own might and prowess. And so there's a way in which Nimrod is a bit of a difficult figure to understand because he's a mighty hunter before the Lord. But
I think
that's vague. What do we?
Phrase could be interpreted as, like, before the Lord, as in, like, he has, like, favor in the eyes of the Lord, or before the Lord, as in, like, sort of like defiance or in opposition.
Oh, like the way we use the term, like flew in the face, right? Like a sort of spitefulness.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah,
and it's unclear from the at least the English text.
Right. Yeah, and I think, trying to remember, that beyond the fact that he was a mighty hunter, was the fact that he was it's mentioned that he has a connection with Babylon, and so that's, like, setting the stage for the narrative that's following shortly after of the Tower of Babel, because it's sort of, you can see the same sort of impulse already present in the individual Nimrod, and then we move on from that to sort of see the communal expression of that same drive.
In Babel.
I think, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Babel. I have this total figment of my imagination. I want to be clear. It's my imagination. But I have always wondered if Babel was more than just some sort of Bronze Age city, right? We imagine it to be primitive because it's old. But I've always looked at this and the story of Noah and wondered, whoa, what if the civilization talked about in the Tower of Babel story, or the civilization around Noah, what if those civilizations were more advanced than our own? I think it's fun to think about.
Yeah, I don't I'll have anything to.
I guess we should just leave that aside because it doesn't have, even if the answer is yes, it doesn't change the fact that this is man's attempt to, I think, as you say, Tower of Babel is man's attempt to mount up to heaven himself, yes?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact. Yeah, it was, you could think of the tower as a kind of bridge, but instead of it being for the purpose of God descending down to humanity. It was for man to ascend
Mm-hmm.
to heaven.
Do you think we're supposed to see in that then man attempting immortality?
That I think, yeah, that's how the narrative treats it,
Mm-hmm.
at least. I'm trying to remember. Like some other author, so who made a connection with the Greek story of Prometheus.
Okay.
And
who brought fire down from heaven to give to the
yeah,
children of men?
maybe that was a different story, getting mixed up. But yeah, the idea of the tower, a sort of like man striving towards self-deification, basically, is tied with the idea of the advancement in technology, because I think I made a point about the use of the different material. Like they have progressed from the natural stone, like the tower is made from baked,
bricks.
baked bricks, and so it that is interpreted by the church fathers as sort of symbolic of there's something more going on than just man using it's not just like a natural and word legitimate extension of
It's just not
like man's creative creative in the sense of before the fall, like man was given dominion.
okay, so it's not just stewardship,
right?
it's
It's
engineering,
there's
right?
something different going on there.
As in, we're supposed to think they're exploiting resources rather than just
I don't know that I want to
harvesting trees or cutting rock. It's
certainly it's moving in that direction.
It's a confection of some kind.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. What do you make the one language part has always, I don't want to say confused me, perplexed me.
They were also confused.
Yeah, they were. They were confused at the end. Why? I just think, okay, what civilizations have accomplished amazing works even while other civilizations have existed at their borders, right? So does the one language, does this represent a literal worldwide unity of languages? Does the one language mean more than just spoken communication? It also refers to a state of the heart, like it's talking about this entire culture. Its heart speaks one language of the desire for wealth or immortality or what have you. I'm perfectly happy for it to mean just everyone could collaborate and everyone sort of belong to one civilization and therefore one civilization's efforts and goals because they all spoke the same language. but I wonder if it also points to uh, a singularity of something else, right? Not just literal language.
Yeah, I think pointing to the I think the one language thing, it's meant to direct our attention to it's the same theme of the centralization, concentration of power, because it's not just, yeah, language doesn't just imply communication, but it also implies power. Like you're able to communicate,
Tell people what to
your
do.
desires. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that just results in you have more power.
Right. Right. We even refer to it as the power of speech.
Yeah, I think I also had the same sort of inevitable questions about like sort of the historicity or other um, sort of how literally are we supposed to take uh, like how much of the world was it supposed to encompass? I think it's not as important.
Right.
To you could still think of whether it was just like that one part of the world, all speaking one language. I think it's important to keep at least that aspect, to take that as literal, because that's then it's related to it's connected to sort of the reversal that happens at Pentecost, with there's a different kind of unity of language there, but that sort of well, there's multiple languages being spoken, but like
yes.
everyone can understand.
And so everyone can understand the message.
Unity as opposed to the confusion that happens in Babel, which is yeah. I think that's also another. I could also write a separate thesis on just the New Testament and all that's going on.
Right.
Everything that I wrote about the Old Testament, I really had to restrain myself from like.
Right, because in both it is God is coming down, right? In Pentecost, God comes down, and then in the Genesis story of Babel, God says, "Let us go down and see what these people are up to." Yeah. Yeah. I'm attracted to the idea that it represents an attempt to bridge the distance between earth and the heavens, and therefore essentially escape mortality, escape limitation, right? I do see that same instinct in the hopes that the hopes whose locus is our technological advancement today for many people, right? Maybe if this technology can get better, maybe if we could perfect it, we could extend right now people want to extend their consciousness beyond the life of their mortal body, but I think pretty soon people will hope that both consciousness and the mortal body can be preserved indefinitely.
feel like Babylon is the ultimate form of self-sufficiency in the mind. Go to heaven, they're all things.
Right, right. I mean, it certainly allows you to get up above the needs, fears, and demands of life down on the surface, right? G.K. Chesterton treats this topic in one of his Father Brown short stories. Father Brown faces a murderer, and he basically says the murderer committed the murder from the top of the cathedral tower, threw down a hammer to someone below, and Father Brown basically says, by being up there, you started to imagine that you were God, right? You looked down upon the teeming masses of humanity, and you chose one man, and you deemed him guilty, right? Threw down your hammer and killed the guy.
Kind of like when you're in a plane, everything seems significant. It's so tiny and small, you're like, what else people even doing?
Yeah. What are they running? Yeah. What are they running around after? Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, it's true. I guess, though, again, the speculation of what Babel might represent in terms of technological advancement or in terms of literal states of civilization is probably secondary to the understanding that yes, this was the natural outgrowth of the corrupted instinct for self-reliance, which begins with Cain in some ways. So yeah. Shoot, do we have time for one more? We got 10 minutes. I think we got 10 minutes.
Okay.
All right. I wanted to know, when I was reading your thesis, why you didn't spend time with Moses leading the Hebrews out of the city.
Yeah.
And into the wilderness, into the desert. I was sort of expecting it as I read it. Like, surely you're going to get to Moses here. Right. I thought, oh, wait a minute, it's not in here. Maybe it was just too much low-hanging fruit, or.
Afraid this will be a disappointing answer, but it really, I just had to cut something out.
You had, right. Something had to go. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I had just as much reason to include other, like I wanted to talk about Joseph and what's the other?
Oh.
And, Solomon. Yeah, there were just like other, like I could have kept going, but I just had to.
You had to kill a baby.
That was the hardest part.
Right.
It's just like choosing which narratives to focus on, and then that's why I still. I think that the small section addressing that the absence of Moses that I included in the thesis, that was also added after the first draft. My advisor told me I had to. Or it would be good to, because most people would probably naturally wonder about the absence of Moses in the dialectic, and yeah, that's if I'm not mistaken, I think it was after the first draft that I added that small section, but yeah, the main reason it was really just like I just didn't have the space to deal with
demands of brevity.
It would just have been a lot. It would have been interesting, but yeah, to also talk about I couldn't have dedicated as much space and time to um, Joshua if I had, and it seemed in the sense that he is the one who actually makes it to the promised land.
Right.
At least that seemed to partly justify my prioritizing his narrative over Moses, but then still including the small section there to explain and justify the jump from. I think I went from Abraham to Joshua.
I believe that's right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a way in which I guess you could say the call of Abraham is akin to the call of Moses, right? Moses, like Abraham, is called away from circumstances of definite comfort, right? I think it's Jordan Peterson that points out that Abraham was living in the tent of his father, might be the phrase, but with the way Jordan Peterson interprets that is Abraham was very comfortable, right? He was, for his time, wealthy and had not essentially gone out and faced the dangers of the wider world. Moses, in a certain way, had not either, being raised in the court of Pharaoh. Now Moses adds another layer because Moses is out in the wilderness. He gets called out into the wilderness and is actually, in his own way, kind of comfortable, right? He adopts the ways of his tribe that hosts him. He gets married and seems to be living a fairly successful life. And then he gets called back out of the desert to return. And yeah, Abraham does go to Egypt. Abraham visits civilizations, but there's not, I don't think, the sense of mission that Moses has when Moses returns to Egypt to then take the people and basically have the people live out the story of Moses, which is you're slaves, but as is noted when people start complaining about their lack of flesh pots out in the desert, there's this implication that yes, they were slaves, yes, they were oppressed, but there was a certain comfort in their circumstances in Egypt. Certainly more comfortable than what they found in the desert because they start complaining about the change of circumstance. All of this is to say, do you think we can make some conclusions about the opinion of the Old Testament authors about the city as being, yes, a place of protection, perhaps a place of veiling ourselves from God's gaze, but the city also as a place of spiritual comfort?
Yeah, and that's why I included the image in Revelation in my introduction, I believe. It points to it's hinted at in that's why I ended it with Cain. I'm sorry, with David. It's sort of what he accomplishes with the city as it's sort of redefined as now being able to sort of host the presence of God. And
like David successfully brings the presence of God into the city.
Right. And it's
baptizes it.
Yeah, it's sort of like a tentative resolution to the initial conflict that is set up between God and the city in the narrative of Cain. And obviously it's tentative because the Old Testament doesn't end with David.
It's provisional.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's pointing to, obviously it's hard to speak of the redemption without going into the New Testament. But I think this is something that came up in the Q&A in my oration. Father Nicoletti asked about a similar question, and the way I think of it is related to this idea of the felix culpa.
Yeah.
If you just looked at the story of Cain, or even if you stopped at Babel, you could just conclude like, I don't know if you remember that I was reading Jacques Ellul. It was one of the many texts that I was reading at the beginning, writing the thesis. But his view was pretty much, it seemed from reading his book, The Meaning of the City, was mainly drawing from sort of the negative pole of what I describe as a dialectic with Cain and the Tower of Babel, and certainly like all very negative conclusions derived from that. But that's not the full story. And the reason why I mentioned the felix culpa is that it's similar to what happens with the city, even though it starts out as very much something that is condemned and seen as a negative reality repeatedly. It's not. That's something that I had to stress as well in the oration. It's not something that is. I didn't want the readers of the thesis to think that I was suggesting that there was this sort of dismissal of the need for cities for us now.
Right, or some sort of really trite summary of, and cities are evil because they represent a lack of trust in providence. So
there are lots of Christian thinkers who have come to that conclusion. Basically, that would be a different conversation to have. But essentially thinking that we should just and maybe I think there's different sort of degrees of that same position. Basically, the world, you could think of the city as the world. It's beyond, or it's so bad right now that we should just like retreat into our the churches, just not engage.
Right.
And that's very much not the biblical response. Shouldn't be the Christian response, I don't think. But
a conversation we could get into another time because unfortunately I think we're out of it. Cynthia, it's always such a pleasure to talk with you. Always gives me a lot of food for thought. Just briefly, like, what are next steps for you? Are you thinking about taking these topics
I think that won't
further?
be brief.
That won't be a
conversation. I'm in the midst of trying to figure that out. By no means any clear answers right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, for what it's worth, your writing is thought provoking, but also so lucid and a joy to see the way in which you harness language to draw out nuances of meaning is really quite delightful. So I really hope you find a way in which you can continue that work. And I always look forward to our conversations, and we hope to have you back here on the GD very soon.
Thanks for having me.
All right.